Okay, in the last video, we looked at how to create a table of values and we looked at two equations. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to look at how to graph from a table of values. Now we're going to use the same two equations from the last video, so you can look at the last video, create a table of values if you need to. So here's my table of values we created in the last video, and this was that person who was getting $20 per hour plus 50. So we calculated and we learned about the independent and dependent variable. So just to refresh, the independent is the one that the rate of change multiplies. So I'm just going to use I for independent. That's always in the first column. So in this case, that was hours. And then D for dependent. So a nice way to remember it is that when you got a table of values, think of it like showing your ID. So I, independent first, and dependent second. When you're graphing, so we're going to graph here in a second, so let's look at our graph here. So when you're graphing, the independent variable is always going to go on the horizontal axis. So independent's down here, and then dependent's going to be over here. So I'm going to graph up here, so I got my graph set up. So again, hours was independent, so that goes down here. And then pay was dependent, so that's going to go over here. So right here in the corner, that's going to be 0. Now when you title these graphs, the way you want to title them is always like this. You want to title them, and I'm just going to put it down here as a guide. Dependent versus independent. So in this case, pay is dependent versus hours, and probably should put hours worked. Okay, so you might be asking, well, that kind of looks a little bit different. I'm used to graphing on the XY grid that has 4 sections. Well, you still are. Okay, because if you notice over here in our table of values, those values are all positive. They're all positive, 0 through 5. And they're all positive, 50 to 150. So all the positive values in the table, the XY grid, are always in that first section here, that first quadrant. So really what we're doing is that we're just showing or highlighting that first section, and that's why it looks like an L there. So again, I'm just going to highlight that there, because where we have all positive values, we're only concentrating on that. So that's a nice way of thinking about why we're just showing that one section of the graph. All right, so let's take a look here. So hours, now you got to come up with your scale. So look here at your table of values and notice that it's going to change a highlighter. Everything's going up by 1s. So we can use that as a scale. So we're going to go up by 1s. Start 0. So every square is going to represent 1. And I could keep going further if I wanted to, but I'm just going to show what I have in the table of values. Now, over here, right, notice, so I'm going to go back here. For the dependent, the first entry is 50, okay? So I don't have anything between 0 and 50. So I'm going to make my first part of the scale 50. And then I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to fill in that first difference. Remember it went up by 20s? So because it's linear, because it's going to be a straight line, I could use the first difference. So that means I could actually just use the entries of that second column. Now, another thing you might want to do is, because you can see here between 0 and 50, it's kind of a big gap. I mean, something's really happening between 0 and 50. So you can add that, I like to call a little dent in the graph, just to kind of say that those values between 0 and 50 don't come into play here. Okay, now we're going to graph. So I'm going to use like purple so it highlights. Okay, so we're going to graph this first point. So when I work 0 hours, I get 50. So I'm at 0, so that means my dot should be right on 50. 1 hour, 70, so I'm going to go over to 1 and then up to 70. 290, I'm going to go over to 2 and then up to 90. 3, and then 110, 4, and then 130, and then go over to 5, and then 150. You can see they all follow in a line, and we knew that was going to happen because the first difference was all consistent. So you want to draw on that line, and you want to put an arrow to say that this will continue. Again, we only went up to 5 hours, so there could be a lot more to this depending on how many more hours this person works. Okay, now let's look at that negative one, right? So now we know independent goes on the horizontal. So that would be months. And then we use B for balance, my bank balance. So there, and then my title would be balance versus months. Okay, so let's go my scale, 0. Okay, this one's going up by ones, so we can keep going up by ones. So again, because we know it's linear, let's look at that first difference. Remember, this one was going down by 20. Okay, so I can use these values for my dependent scale. Now you got to be careful, right? 500 is not going to go there. That's wrong. So I'm going to erase that. I should get my eraser. So I'm kind of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just going to extend a little bit up. Didn't have quite enough room. Sorry about that. Okay, so 500's got to go up at the top because that's the highest, right? So again, I'm just going to write this down. This always goes from low to high. See, low was 0, high was 5. Same thing up here on the dependent, it goes from low to high. All right, so the one here at the bottom's got to be the lowest one. So that's going to be 400. And then you can fill in the rest. Okay, so now we're ready to graph. Okay, 0, 500. So at 0, I'm still at 500. 1, 480. 2, 460. 3, 440. 4, 420. And 5, 400. So again, right, we're going to look here. Now, we knew this line was going to go down because the first difference was negative. So we want to draw it going down. And again, there's quite a gap between 0 and 400, so we can put that dent there to say those values are not coming into play here. And we've got my arrow here at the end, knowing that this could keep going down.